I stood barefoot at airport security, watching my life sit in a plastic bin. Suddenly, an officer blocked my path. It was not a random check. He knew my name. My own parents had reported me as a security threat and impersonated me to cancel my flight. They did not just want me to miss the hearing, they wanted to paint me as unstable to erase me from my grandfather's inheritance. My name is Jocelyn Castillo. I am 34 years old, and at 4 in the morning, the world feels less like a place of possibility and more like a closing trap. The automatic doors of the terminal parted with a hiss, hitting me with a blast of recycled air that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. Most people come to the airport with dreams of beaches or the dull resignation of a business trip. I was here for neither. I was here to run a sprint against a legal clock that was ticking down in a courthouse 3 states away. My grandfather was dead. That was the hard fact that sat like a stone in my gut. But the sharper, more jagged reality was that my parents were alive, and they were currently doing everything in their power to ensure I did not make it to Juniper Wells County by 9 o'clock this morning. I checked the departure board, my eyes scanning the grid of yellow lights. Flight 724 to Denver, connecting to the regional jumper that would get me within a rental car's drive of the probate court. It was on time. I had 2 hours before boarding, but I had arrived early because paranoia is a learned survival trait when you grow up in the Castillo household. "We will handle it, Jocelyn," my father had said on the phone yesterday, his voice smooth, like oil over water. "You are too emotional. Stay in the city. Let us deal with the lawyers." "We will handle it" was code. It meant, we will rewrite the narrative while you are not in the room to defend yourself. They wanted a summary judgment. They wanted to present the court with a picture of a grieving, unstable daughter who was unfit to inherit the legacy my grandfather had explicitly left to me. They wanted to strip me out of the will, not with a fight, but with a signature on a piece of paper in an empty room. I adjusted the strap of my bag, feeling the weight of the binder inside. It contained the only things that mattered right now: my birth certificate, the copy of the will I had saved on a cloud drive 3 years ago, and a flight confirmation number that cost me $600 I barely had. The security line was a serpentine beast, coiled back and forth between the tension barriers. It was the morning rush. Businessmen in gray suits were already checking emails on their phones, tapping away with aggressive thumbs. Families with toddlers were trying to collapse strollers that seemed designed by engineers who hated parents. The noise was a low, constant hum, the beep of scanners, the clatter of plastic bins, the barking orders of the TSA agents, laptops out, shoes off, belts off, pockets empty. I joined the queue, my heart hammering a rhythm that had nothing to do with caffeine. I needed to be calm. I needed to be invisible. Just another passenger. Just another face in the crowd. I moved forward, shuffling in my socks. I grabbed 3 gray bins, jacket in one, bag in the second, boots in the third. My movements were mechanical, practiced. I placed my phone in the bin, screen down. It had been buzzing since 3:30 in the morning. Calls from my mother, texts from my father. I hadn't answered a single one. Engaging with them was like wrestling with a tarp in a hurricane. You just got smothered. I stepped toward the body scanner, the sleek cylindrical machine that always made me feel like a specimen in a lab. "Step forward, feet on the yellow markers. Hands over your head," the agent instructed, his voice bored, repetitive. I did as I was told. The machine whirred around me, a quick burst of millimeter wave technology checking for anomalies. I stepped out the other side, looking toward the conveyor belt where my life was waiting for me. That was when the air in the terminal seemed to change pressure. It wasn't a sound, it was a lack of movement. 2 uniformed officers were walking briskly past the metal detectors. They weren't strolling, they weren't chatting, they were moving with target-locked precision. They bypassed the family with the screaming toddler. They bypassed the businessman with the expensive watch. They stopped directly in front of me. "Jocelyn Castillo?" The voice was loud, not shouting, but projected. It was the kind of voice designed to cut through ambient noise and demand immediate submission. Every head in the security area turned. For a second, The entire airport froze. The woman behind me stopped reaching for her purse. The man putting on his belt paused, the buckle halfway through the loop. There is a specific social phenomenon that happens when police single someone out in a public space. It is an instant, collective judgment. The crowd recoils. They create a physical circle of isolation around you. They don't know what you did, but they assume you did something. You are suddenly radioactive. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I locked my knees. I refused to tremble. I had spent 34 years learning how to not give my parents the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I could handle a stare down with airport security. "I am Jocelyn Castillo," I said. My voice was steady, clearer than I expected. "Ma'am, step out of the line, please," the lead officer said. He was tall, with a buzz cut and eyes that gave away absolutely nothing. His hand was resting near his belt, not on his weapon, but close enough to signal readiness. "Is there a problem, officer?" I asked, not moving yet. "Step out of the line, ma'am, now." I looked at my bins, my boots, my laptop, my ID. They were slowly rolling away down the conveyor belt, moving out of my reach. "My identification and my property are on the belt," I said, keeping my hands visible at waist level, palms open. "I need to retrieve them. We have your property. Come with us." I stepped out of the flow of passengers. The gap I left was immediately filled by the rushing current of people who were relieved it wasn't them. I saw a mother pull her child closer as I walked past, as if I were contagious. The shame burned hot on the back of my neck, but I swallowed it down. Shame is useless. Shame is a waste of energy. I needed logic. "Am I under arrest?" I asked as they flanked me, one on each side. We were walking away from the gates, away from my flight, away from the hearing. "We are detaining you for questioning regarding a security report," the officer said. A security report? The words echoed in my head, bouncing around like a loose coin in a dryer. They walked me past the curious stares of the ticket agents, past the coffee shop where people paused mid-sip to watch the perp walk. They led me to a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only" near the restrooms. The lead officer swiped a badge, and the door clicked open with a heavy, metallic thud. The room inside was small, windowless, and aggressively beige. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat. There was a metal table bolted to the floor and 3 chairs. 2 were on one side. 1 was on the other. The single chair, the suspect's chair, had a metal loop on the leg, designed for handcuffs. "Sit down," the officer said. I sat. The metal was cold against my legs. I kept my posture upright. I placed my hands flat on the table. "I have a flight in 90 minutes, I said. "I am an attorney's assistant. I know my rights. If I am not under arrest, I would like to know exactly why my freedom of movement is being restricted." The second officer, a younger man who looked like he was trying too hard to look tough, stood by the door, blocking the exit. The lead officer pulled out a small notepad. "We received a credible tip identifying a passenger matching your description and name as a potential threat to aviation safety," he said. He watched my face, looking for a twitch, a nervous blink, the telltale signs of guilt. "A tip," I repeated. "A call was made to the Airport Operations Center," he continued. The caller stated that Jocelyn Castillo was in a state of severe mental agitation, had made verbal threats regarding the flight crew, and was potentially carrying prohibited items intended to cause disruption. He paused, letting the accusation hang in the dead air of the room. "Do you have any prohibited items in your possession, Ms. Castillo? Explosives? Incendiary devices? Sharp objects?" "I have a laptop, a change of clothes, and legal documents," I said. "You have my bag. You can x-ray it. You can hand search it. You will find nothing because there is nothing to find." "And the threats? Did you tell anyone you were going to make them pay?" The phrasing hit me. Make them pay. I closed my eyes for a fraction of a second, and in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw my father's face. I recalled the conversation from 3 days ago. The only time I had lost my temper. I had screamed at them over the phone when they told me they had cremated Grandpa without waiting for me to say goodbye. "You can't just erase him," I had yelled. "You think you can steal everything he worked for? I'm going to stop you. I'm going to make you pay for what you did to him." It was a figure of speech. It was the cry of a heartbroken granddaughter. But to Ronan Castillo, it was ammunition. My parents hadn't just called the police and said I had a bomb. That would be too easily disproven. And filing a false police report about a bomb is a high-level felony that gets traced quickly. No, they were smarter than that. They had weaponized the gray area. They had called and used the wellness check language mixed with security buzzwords. Mental agitation, threats, disruption. They painted a picture of a woman having a breakdown, a woman who was dangerous to herself and others. They knew that in the post-9/11 world, the system does not take chances. The system freezes first and asks questions later. They didn't need me arrested. They didn't need me charged. They just needed me stuck in a windowless room for 2 hours while Flight 724 took off without me. They were buying time. I looked at the officer. I saw the skepticism in his eyes. He was looking for a terrorist or a maniac. Instead, he was looking at a woman in a blazer and no shoes, who looked more exhausted than dangerous. "Officer," I said, keeping my voice low and terrifyingly calm, "I am going to tell you exactly who made that call. I am going to tell you his name, his phone number, and his address, and then I am going to ask you to look at the call log and tell me if I am right." The officer blinked. He hadn't expected that. "The caller was a male, roughly 60 years old," I said. "His name is Ronan Castillo. He is my father, and he is currently trying to prevent me from attending a court hearing where I am the primary beneficiary of a multi-million-dollar estate." The room went silent. The hum of the ventilation system seemed to get louder. "This isn't a security threat," I said, leaning forward slightly, locking eyes with him. "This is a distraction, and right now, you are inadvertently aiding in the obstruction of justice." The officer shifted his weight. The certainty in his posture wavered. He looked at his partner, then back at me. "Check the source," I challenged him. "If I am wrong, you can cuff me to this table, but if I am right, you need to clear me. Now." He stared at me for another long moment, assessing. Then, without a word, he turned and opened the door, stepping out into the hallway, leaving the door cracked just enough for me to hear him radioing dispatch. I sat there, my hands shaking slightly now that he wasn't looking. I looked at the clock on the wall. 4:45. I had time. But I knew my parents. This was just the opening move. If they had gone this far, if they were willing to risk federal laws just to slow me down, they weren't going to stop with a phone call. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. The game had started. I was barefoot in a holding cell, but I wasn't out yet. "Come on," I whispered to the empty room. "Come on." The metal door clicked open again, breaking the heavy silence of the interrogation room. The lead officer walked back in, but the energy had shifted. It was less aggressive now, more bureaucratic. He held a tablet in one hand and a printed sheet of paper in the other. He pulled the chair out and sat opposite me, the metal legs screeching against the linoleum floor. "Ms. Castillo," he began, looking at the paper rather than my face. "I want to be very clear about what we are dealing with here. The Transportation Security Administration takes all reports seriously, regardless of the source. However, we also have a duty to investigate the validity of the claims." "I understand," I said. My voice was level. I kept my hands folded on the table, resisting the urge to wring them together. "Please read me the specific allegations. I cannot refute a ghost." He adjusted his glasses. "The caller stated that you, Jocelyn Castillo, made specific verbal threats during a phone conversation yesterday evening. The exact phrase reported was that you intended to, and I quote, make someone pay for what they have done. The caller also indicated that you have been exhibiting, quote, erratic and abnormal behavior consistent with a psychotic break, end quote. Finally, the report suggests you may be carrying documents or materials intended to disrupt a federal legal proceeding. I listened, absorbing each word like a blow. Erratic, psychotic, disrupt. These were not random words. These were keywords. They were carefully chosen to trigger specific threat assessment protocols. If I were labeled erratic, no airline captain would let me board. If I were disruptive, I could be banned from flying pending an investigation. I did say I would make them pay, I admitted. The officer's eyes snapped up to meet mine. So you confess to the threat? I confess to using a common idiom regarding civil litigation. I corrected him instantly. I am involved in a contested probate case regarding my grandfather's estate. The payment I referred to is financial restitution and legal accountability, not physical violence. Context is not a crime, officer. I leaned forward slightly. As for the documents intended to disrupt a legal proceeding, that is a fascinating way to describe evidence. I am carrying a certified copy of a will and a notarized affidavit. The only thing those documents will disrupt is my parents' attempt to commit fraud. The officer looked at me, then back at his tablet. He was trying to reconcile the profile of a dangerous lunatic with the articulate woman sitting in front of him. You mentioned a hearing, he said. Today, 9 a.m., in Juniper Wells County, I said. If I am not physically present in that courtroom, my parents, the people who likely made this call, will petition the judge for an ex parte hearing. They will argue that my absence is proof of my lack of interest or, conveniently, my instability. They are using you, officer. They are using the federal government as a delay tactic. He tapped his pen against the table. That is a serious accusation. Filing a false report with the intention of interfering with aviation security is a federal crime. Then let's prove it, I said. I want you to pull the dispatch log. He hesitated. We don't typically share raw intelligence data with the subject of an investigation. I am not asking for intelligence data, I said. I am asking for the metadata of the tip. You have the ANI and ALI data, automatic number identification and location identification. I want to know who called, what time they called, and how long the call lasted. The officer looked at his partner standing by the door. There was a silent exchange between them, a nod. I can't show you the screen, the lead officer said, his voice dropping an octave. But I can verify the source. He swiped on his tablet, tapping through several menus. The silence in the room stretched thin. I could hear the hum of the vending machine in the hallway. I watched his eyes scan the digital log. Then, his eyebrows rose, just a fraction of an inch. He stopped scrolling. He looked closer at the screen. Well, he exhaled. It is Ronan Castillo, isn't it? I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He tapped the screen again, expanding a section of the log. The number is registered to a cellular account in the name of Ronan Castillo, address in the city suburbs. And the time? I pressed. The report was filed at 4:17 this morning, he said. Check the history, I said. Before 4:17, were there other attempts? The officer frowned. Why would there be other attempts? Because my father is a perfectionist, I said, and he is a terrible liar. He rehearses. The officer scrolled back up. His frown deepened. 4:12 a.m., duration 8 seconds, disconnected by caller. 4:14 a.m., duration 12 seconds, disconnected by caller. He looked up at me, and for the first time, the suspicion was gone. In its place was a look of dull amazement. He called 3 times, the officer muttered. He called, got cold feet, hung up, called again, hung up, then called the 3rd time and read the script. He was practicing, I said. He wanted to make sure he used the right buzzwords. He probably wrote them down on a notepad. Psychotic break. Threat. He needed to sound convincing enough to stop me, but not so specific that he would get arrested for a bomb threat. The officer set the tablet down on the table. The dynamic had completely inverted. I was no longer the suspect. I was the witness to a crime committed against the TSA's time and resources. This changes the context, the officer said. He stood up and walked to the door, whispering something to his partner. The partner nodded and left the room, presumably to go retrieve my bins from the purgatory of the security belt. "I need to document this," I said. "I want to file a voluntary statement regarding this incident. I want it on the record that I was detained based on a false report filed by Ronan Castillo." The officer pulled a form from his clipboard. "You can write a statement, but I need to warn you, Ms. Castillo, this doesn't automatically mean we arrest him today. That is a separate investigation. I don't care about arresting him today," I said. Taking the pen he offered, my hand was steady as I wrote the date. "I need the paper trail. I need you to preserve the audio recording of that call. Don't let it get purged in the 24-hour cycle. Tag it as evidence in a harassment case. I will flag it," he promised. "We keep recordings for 30 days by default, but I will mark this one for permanent retention pending legal review," I wrote quickly. Summarizing the facts: detained at airport security, false report filed by Ronan Castillo, 3 call attempts noted in dispatch log, caller identified as father of subject, currently opposing party in a state litigation. I signed the bottom of the page with a flourish that felt like the first strike of a sword. "I need a copy," I said, "and I need the incident report number." The officer tore the pink carbon copy from the form and handed it to me. Then he wrote a string of numbers on the back of a business card. "Incident 2026 Alpha 9, he read aloud. "This is the master file number. If anyone asks, if the airline asks, if the court asks, you give them this number. It links to my report." He paused, looking me in the eye. "And Ms. Castillo? This report will explicitly state that you were detained for a standard security inquiry and cleared. It will state that no contraband was found. It will state that you were cooperative. It will confirm that you were never under arrest, never handcuffed, and never charged." "Thank you," I said. I took the card. It felt heavier than cardstock should. It felt like a shield. "You are free to go," he said. "My partner has your bags at the front desk. You might still make your flight if you run." I stood up. My legs felt weak, the adrenaline crash beginning to set in, but I forced myself to move. "One more thing," the officer said as I reached the door. I turned back. "Good luck in court," he said. "Get what is yours." I nodded, unable to speak, and pushed out into the hallway. I grabbed my bins from the bewildered younger officer at the desk, shoving my feet into my boots without bothering to zip them. I threw my laptop into my bag. I checked my phone. 5:25. The flight boarded in 20 minutes. The gate was in Terminal C. I was in Terminal A. I started to run. I ran past the slow walkers, past the duty-free shops, past the smell of cinnamon rolls and desperation. I ran until my lungs burned and my bag slapped a bruise into my hip. I stepped into the secure area, the vast open space of the terminal spreading out before me like a promised land. I checked the digital clock on the wall. 5:45 in the morning. I had done it. I had survived the ambush. A surge of adrenaline, sharp and electric, shot through me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to turn to the security camera in the corner, flip it off, and shout, "Nice try, Ronan." "Thank you, officer," I said, turning to Miller. "Go," he said. "Don't miss it." I turned and started to walk, my pace quickening with every step. I was going to make it. I was going to land in Juniper Wells, walk into that courtroom, and drop the notary journal on the plaintiff's table like a stick of dynamite. But the universe, or perhaps the Castillo family, was not done with me yet. The feeling of victory lasted exactly 11 seconds. It ended when my phone vibrated in my hand. It wasn't a call. It was a long, sustained buzz, the kind that signifies a priority notification. Then it buzzed again, and again. 3 rapid pulses. My stomach dropped. It was a physical sensation, like missing a step on a staircase in the dark. I slowed down. Lifting the phone, the first notification was from the airline app. Gate change. Flight 724 now. Departing gate C12. Gate C12. That was on the other side of the concourse. Annoying, but manageable. I could run. I adjusted my grip on my bag, preparing to sprint. But then I saw the second notification. It was an email. The subject line was stark and terrifyingly efficient. Trip update. Cancellation confirmation. I stopped walking. People flowed around me like water around a rock, grumbling as they dodged my frozen figure. I opened the email. My fingers felt numb, as if the blood had suddenly decided to retreat to my core to keep my vital organs alive. Dear Jocelyn, per your request, we have successfully canceled your reservation for Flight 724 to Denver. A refund of $412 has been initiated to the original form of payment. We hope you will choose to fly with us again in the future. I stared at the screen, the words blurred. Airline email, auto. Per your request. Your reservation has been canceled. I hadn't requested anything. I had been in a room with no signal, fighting for my reputation. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't weather. It wasn't a mechanical failure. It was identity theft. My mind raced, connecting the dots with horrifying clarity. While I was busy proving to Officer Miller that I wasn't a terrorist, my parents had moved to the second phase of their plan. They knew the police report might not stick. They knew I might talk my way out of it. So they didn't rely on the police. They relied on customer service. They had my date of birth. They had my full name. They likely had the confirmation number because my mother had helpfully forwarded me the itinerary when I first booked it, claiming she wanted to know when I landed so she could pray for me. She hadn't been praying. She had been data mining. Ronan or my mother had called the airline. They had impersonated me. They had probably used that tearful, stressed voice my mother perfected. Oh, I am so sorry. Something terrible has come up. I can't fly today. Please, cancel it. Yes, verify me. My birthday is March 4th. They had deleted my seat. I looked up at the departure screens hanging from the ceiling. I found my flight. Denver, 6:05 a.m., on time. The flight was there. The plane was there. The pilot was probably doing his pre-flight checks right now, but I wasn't on the manifest anymore. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This was intimate. This wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a violation. They had worn my skin. They had used my identity to sabotage my future. I looked at the gate number again. C-12. It was a 10-minute run, if I ran there. What would happen? The gate agent would tell me I had no ticket. The flight was likely oversold. The morning flights to Denver always were. If my seat was canceled, the system would have automatically given it to the next person on the standby list within seconds. My seat was gone. I looked at the phone again. The refund notice. $412. They didn't just cancel it. They refunded it to make it irreversible. You can't uncancel a refunded ticket. You have to buy a new one. And the price for a same-day walk-up ticket? It would be over $1,000. I checked my bank balance app. $214.80. I didn't have the money to buy a new ticket. I stood in the middle of the terminal, the rush of the morning commute swirling around me, and I felt a scream building in my throat that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with rage. They had stripped me. They had stripped me of my credibility with the police, and now they had stripped me of my passage. They wanted me to give up. They wanted me to look at this email, look at my empty bank account, and go home. They wanted me to crawl back to my apartment and wait for the phone call where they would tell me, so sorrowfully, that the judge had granted them control and that it was for the best. I tightened my grip on the bag handle until my knuckles turned white. I thought of the notary journal. I thought of my grandfather sitting in his study, looking at me over his reading glasses, saying, "Jocelyn, they will come for you when I am gone. The wolves will come. Do not let them eat you." I was not going home. I looked at the customer service desk in the distance. The line was 20 people deep. I didn't have time for the line. I needed to get to the gate. I needed to look a human being in the eye and explain that a crime had been committed. I needed to undo the undoable. I started to run again, not the panicked sprint of a fugitive, but the hard, driving run of a soldier charging a trench. Per your request. I would show them a request. I dodged a janitor's cart, hurdled a discarded duffel bag, and banked hard around the corner toward Concourse C. My breath came in sharp gasps, but my mind was cold, clear ice. They thought canceling a ticket was the end of the game? They forgot who taught me how to play. I ran toward the gate, the email still glowing on my screen like a declaration of war. I bypassed the general customer service queue, which was a snake of miserable people stretching back toward the food court. I did not have time to stand behind a family arguing about baggage fees or a businessman complaining about his seat upgrade. I went straight to the priority assistance counter. There was no one there, just a young agent typing furiously on a keyboard, his face bathed in the blue light of the monitor. I slammed my hand down on the counter, not aggressively, but with enough force to break his trance. "I need help," I said, "and I need a supervisor. But you will have to do for the first 30 seconds. The agent looked up, startled. His name tag read, Kevin. He looked about 22, with the weary eyes of someone who had already been yelled at 5 times before sunrise. "Ma'am, the line starts back there," he said, pointing a pen toward the chaos behind me. "My flight was canceled fraudulently 5 minutes ago," I said, my voice tight and precise. "I am currently standing at the gate, but your system says I requested a refund. I did not. Someone impersonated me to commit identity theft and wire fraud. I need you to pull up my record right now." I slid my ID across the counter. "Jocelyn Castillo, Flight 724 to Denver." The words identity theft and fraud are trigger words in the corporate world. They cut through the script. Kevin stopped pointing at the line. He took my ID, looked at my face, and then began typing. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of the mechanical keyboard was loud in the sudden silence between us. I watched his eyes scan the screen. I knew exactly what he was seeing. A wall of text, codes, timestamps. "Ms. Castillo," Kevin said, his tone shifting to that guarded, neutral frequency employees use when they suspect a problem is above their pay grade. "I see the cancellation here. It was processed at 5:32 a.m. The notes say the caller verified the booking reference and the answer to the security question." "What was the security question?" I asked. "Mother's maiden name," Kevin said. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Of course, the oldest trick in the book, and the one piece of data my parents obviously had. "I did not make that call," I said. "I was in TSA detention at 5:32 a." Kevin blinked. "Excuse me?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the card Officer Miller had given me, the white cardstock with the handwritten incident number on the back. I placed it on the counter next to my ID. It looked small, but in the hierarchy of airport authority, it was a heavy object. "This is a federal incident report number," I said, leaning in. "Incident 2026 Alpha 9. I was detained by airport police because my father, Ronan Castillo, called in a false security threat to stop me from boarding this flight. When that failed, he called your airline and canceled my ticket. If you look at your call logs, you are going to see a number that matches the one in the police report." Kevin looked at the card. He looked at me. He realized this wasn't just a missed flight. This was a crime scene. "Give me a second," he said. He didn't just type this time. He opened a new window. I saw the reflection of a black screen with green text in his glasses. The legacy mainframe system, the deep back end where the real data lived. He entered a command string, /Romeo, Echo, Mike. "I am accessing the internal remarks field," he narrated, almost to himself. "Usually we just see the summary, but the agent who took the call..." "Okay, here it is." He leaned closer to the screen. "The caller identified himself," Kevin said slowly. "He didn't pretend to be you. He identified himself as a third party acting on your behalf." "Read it," I said. "Read exactly what he told your representative." Kevin squinted. "Caller stated passenger Jocelyn Castillo is currently experiencing a mental health crisis and is unsafe to fly solo. Caller requested immediate cancellation and refund to prevent passenger from self-harm at altitude." My blood ran cold. Self-harm at altitude. It was brilliant. Evil, but brilliant. No airline agent in the world would refuse that request. It was a liability nightmare. If they let me fly and I hurt myself, they would be sued. By canceling the ticket, they were protecting me. My father had used the airline's own safety protocols as a weapon to ground me. He used the safety card, I whispered. The agent noted that the caller provided the full booking code and the credit card verification number, Kevin continued. Since the card on file is under the name— Wait, the card is in my name, I said. But he knows the number. He was the co-signer on the account 10 years ago, and I never changed it. Kevin looked at me with a mixture of pity and horror. He was seeing the full picture now. A domestic dispute played out through the grim mechanics of the reservation system. He lied, I said. I am not unstable. I am a victim of harassment, and I need you to fix this. The flight is closed. Ms. Castillo, Kevin said gently. The doors are shut. They are pushing back. I looked out the window behind him. Sure enough, the jet bridge was retracting. My plane, my chance, was disconnecting from the terminal. I need the next flight, I said instantly. And I need the records. Print that screen. Print the internal remarks with the timestamp and the caller's name. I can't release internal company documents, Kevin began, the corporate training kicking back in. You are going to release them to me, or you are going to release them to a subpoena, I said. That record proves my father impersonated a medical authority or guardian to defraud a contract of carriage. I need it for the hearing I'm currently missing. Print it, please. The please was what did it. It wasn't a demand. It was a plea from a human being standing on the edge of a cliff. Kevin looked around to see if a manager was watching. Then he hit Control-P. The dot matrix printer under the counter whirred to life. He tore off the sheet and slid it across to me, face down. I didn't give you that, he muttered. Thank you, I said, sliding it into my binder. Now, get me to Denver. Kevin went back to the main screen. Okay, next flight out is Flight 492. It departs in, he winced, 45 minutes, but it is fully booked, oversold by 3. Keep looking, I said. Connect me through anywhere. Chicago, Dallas, Salt Lake, I don't care. He typed rapidly. Salt Lake is grounded due to snow. Chicago is full. Wait. He stopped. I have a seat on the 8:15 to Denver, he said. It is Flight 801, but it arrives at— He checked the arrival time. It touches down at 10:30 local time. 10:30? The hearing started at 9 o'clock. If I landed at 10:30, I wouldn't get to the courthouse until nearly noon. The judge would have already ruled. My parents would have already won. That is too late, I said. I need something earlier. Look at other airlines. Can you endorse my ticket over to another carrier? I can't endorse a refunded ticket, Kevin said apologetically. Technically, you don't have a ticket anymore. The money was sent back. You are a new customer. I felt the walls closing in. The logic was suffocating. Wait, Kevin said. His eyes widened. A seat just opened up on the 492, the oversold flight. Someone just misconnected from London. I will take it, I said. When does it land? 8:10 a.m. local time, he said. 8:10. If I had a rental car waiting, if I drove like a maniac, the courthouse was 40 minutes from the airport. I could be there by 8:50. I could walk through the doors right as the bailiff was calling the case. Book it, I said. Okay. The fare class is different, Kevin said, his voice hesitant. Since it is a last-minute walk-up on a nearly full flight, the price is significant. How much? $1,240.50. I froze. I had $200 in my checking account. The refund from the first ticket would take 3 to 5 business days to process. I was in the financial valley of death. I don't have that in my debit account, I said, my voice failing for the first time. I can't reinstate the old fare because it was fully refunded, Kevin explained, looking pained. The system won't let me override the price on a same-day purchase without a manager code. And my manager is in a meeting until 6. I didn't have until 6. I reached into the back of my wallet, past the debit card, past the library card, to the secret slot where I kept the emergency card. It was a credit card with a high interest rate that I had opened 3 years ago for catastrophes only. I had sworn never to use it. I had sworn I wouldn't end up in debt like my parents, shuffling money between accounts to hide the holes. But this was a catastrophe. I pulled the card out. It felt cold and plastic in my hand. "Run it," I said. "Are you sure?" Kevin asked. "It is non-refundable. If I don't get on this plane, the money doesn't matter," I said. "If I don't get on this plane, I lose everything. Run it." He took the card. He swiped it. The seconds that followed were the longest of the morning. Authorizing. "Please work. Please don't decline. Please don't let Ronan have canceled this too. Approved." The printer churned again. A boarding pass. A real one this time. Kevin handed it to me along with my credit card. "Gate B4, he said. "Boarding in 20 minutes. Run." I took the pass. I stared at the time. Departing 6:45 a.m. I looked at Kevin. "You verified my identity for this one, right? No one changes this unless I'm standing here?" "I put a do not modify lock on the PNR, Kevin said. "It requires a supervisor password to change anything now. You are safe." "Thank you, Kevin," I said. "You just saved my life." I grabbed my bag and turned away from the counter, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had a ticket. I had a chance. But as I walked toward Concourse B, slowing my pace just enough to catch my breath, a dark realization settled over me like a shroud. My parents were smart. They knew airline schedules. They knew that if they canceled my 6 o'clock flight, the next viable option wasn't until nearly 7. They knew the flight time. They knew the drive time to the courthouse. They hadn't canceled my ticket just to make me give up. They weren't banking on me going home and crying. They were banking on the math. They knew I would fight. They knew I would buy another ticket. But they calculated that even if I did, I would be landing at 8:10. By the time I got my bag, got the car, and fought the morning traffic, I would be walking into the courtroom at 9:15 or 9:30. They wanted me to be late. They wanted me to burst into the courtroom, sweaty, frantic, and disheveled. Right after the judge had called the case, they wanted me to look like a mess. They wanted to point at me and say, "See? She can't even manage a schedule. How can she manage an estate?" It was a delay tactic designed to weaponize my own determination. They wanted me to arrive just in time to lose. I looked at the boarding pass in my hand. Seat 24. B. I wasn't just racing a clock anymore. I was racing a perception. I had to be calm. I had to be precise. And I had to make up 20 minutes of time that simply did not exist. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the rental car company. I couldn't wait in line at the counter when I landed. I needed the car running at the curb. "Hello?" I said when the automated voice answered. "Operator, operator, operator." I wasn't going to be late. I would drive on the sidewalk if I had to. I walked faster, the sound of my boots on the terrazzo floor echoing the promise I had made to myself in the interrogation room. I am coming. The cabin of Flight 492 smelled of recirculated air and the faint, chemical scent of sanitizing wipes. I squeezed into seat 24 Bravo. The middle seat, wedged between a man in a bulky fleece jacket and a teenager wearing noise-canceling headphones. It was a tight fit. My knees pressed against the plastic tray table in front of me, and my bag, the bag containing the notary journal, the will, and my entire future, was jammed securely under the seat, wrapped around my ankle like a shackle. I wasn't going to let it go, not for a second. I reached for the seatbelt, the metal tongue clicking into the buckle with a finality that usually signaled safety. For most people, this click means the stress of the airport is over. You sit back, you close your eyes, you let the physics of flight take over. But as I pulled the strap tight across my lap, my phone vibrated in my hand. It wasn't a text. It wasn't a call. It was a push notification from the Juniper Wells County Court electronic filing system. I had subscribed to case updates 3 months ago, the day my grandfather died. hoping to never see anything more than routine scheduling notes. I looked at the screen. The brightness was turned up too high, cutting through the dim cabin light. Case update. Emergency scheduling order granted. My thumb hovered over the screen. Emergency scheduling? Probate courts move at the speed of tectonic plates. Nothing is an emergency unless a body is missing or money is burning. I tapped the notification. The app loaded, a spinning wheel of death that seemed to mock my heart rate. Order. Hearing on temporary special administration rescheduled. Previous time, 9 o'clock a.m. New time, 7 o'clock a.m. I stared at the numbers. 7 o'clock. I looked at the corner of my phone screen. The time was currently 6:42 in the morning. The hearing had been moved up by 2 hours. It was starting in 18 minutes. I felt the air leave my lungs. It wasn't a slow leak. It was a vacuum failure. I turned my head to look out the porthole window, seeing the ground crew loading the last of the luggage. Their movements slow and casual. They didn't know. The man next to me, adjusting his air vent, didn't know. I was trapped in a metal tube that hadn't even pushed back from the gate. And in 18 minutes, a judge 3 states away was going to bang a gavel and ask if Jocelyn Castillo was present. And when I didn't answer, my parents would win. It hit me then, the full, terrifying architecture of their plan. It wasn't just a series of obstacles. It was a perfect 3-act structure of legal assassination. Act 1. The police. Report me as a threat to generate an official detainment record. Act 2. The airline. Cancel my flight to physically prevent me from traveling. Act 3. The court. Use the detainment and the missed flight as proof of my instability to move the hearing up and proceed without me. They weren't just trying to make me late. They were engineering a default judgment. They wanted to stand before the judge at 7 o'clock sharp and say, "Your Honor, clearly our daughter is not coming. She was detained by police this morning. She is erratic. We need to take over the estate immediately to protect it. If the hearing started at 7 and I landed at 8:10, I wasn't just late, I was non-existent." "Ladies and gentlemen, the cabin door is now closed," the flight attendant's voice chimed over the intercom, cheerful and oblivious. "Please switch all devices to airplane mode." No, I had maybe 3 minutes before we taxied. 3 minutes of signal. I didn't switch to airplane mode. I opened my contacts and dialed the number for the Juniper Wells probate clerk. I had memorized it. I had called it so many times in the last month that my fingers danced over the keypad without thought. Ring, ring, ring. "Probate division, this is Sarah," a voice answered. It sounded tired, the voice of a civil servant who had started her day too early. "Sarah, this is Jocelyn Castillo," I said. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I spoke fast, enunciating every consonant. "I am the respondent in the Castillo estate matter. Case number 4922. I just received a notification that my hearing was moved to 7 o'clock. Is this accurate?" There was a pause, the sound of typing on the other end. "Castillo," Sarah muttered. "Yes, Judge Harrison signed an emergency scheduling order 10 minutes ago. The hearing is set for 7 o'clock in chambers." "On what grounds?" I demanded. My voice rose, and the man in the fleece jacket glanced at me. I lowered my volume, but increased the intensity. Why was it moved? I was subpoenaed for 9 o'clock. The petitioners, that would be Ronan and Eleanor Castillo, filed an emergency motion at opening this morning, Sarah recited, reading from a screen. The motion cites, let me see here, imminent security risk and respondents' inability to appear due to police custody. The world tilted on its axis. Due to police custody, there it was, the lie, the weaponized truth. "I am not in police custody," I said, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles ached. "I am sitting on a plane, Flight 492 to Denver. I am a free citizen. My parents filed a false police report to create that custody record, and now they are using it to lie to the judge." "Ma'am, I just managed the calendar," Sarah said, her tone hardening. She was used to hysterical airs. "If you are not in custody, you can explain that at the hearing, I can't explain it at the hearing because I am on a plane that lands at 8:10, I hissed. They moved the time specifically so I couldn't be there. They are manipulating the court schedule to strip me of my due process. Well, if you aren't present, the judge will likely make a ruling based on the filings, Sarah said. That is standard procedure for emergency motions. The plane lurched. We were pushing back. I need to speak to the judge, I said. The judge is in chambers prepping for the docket. He doesn't take calls. Then I need to submit evidence, I said. I have proof. I have a federal incident report number proving I was released and cleared. I have logs showing my father called in the false threat. I have records showing he canceled my ticket. I need to get this in front of Judge Harrison before 7 o'clock. We don't accept filings via email, Sarah said automatically. You have to file through the e-portal or in person. The e-portal takes 24 hours to process an index, I argued. By the time it hits the judge's desk, he will have already signed the order giving them my grandfather's money. Sarah, listen to me. This is fraud. They are committing fraud on the court right now. If the judge rules on this based on a lie, and it comes out later that the court was manipulated, that is going to be a mess for everyone, including the clerk's office. It was a gamble. Clerks don't care about justice as much as they care about process. They hate messy dockets. They hate appeals that happen because paperwork got lost. I cannot file an official document for you, Sarah said, but her voice wavered. She was hesitating. I don't need it filed officially yet, I said. I need it seen. Is there a courtesy copy address? A clerk's inbox? Something the judge looks at for emergency exhibits? Ma'am, the flight attendants are asking everyone to sit down, the man next to me whispered aggressively. I ignored him. Sarah, please, I am about to lose signal. If I don't send this now, an innocent woman loses her inheritance and 2 liars win. Do not let them use your court as a weapon. Silence on the line. The engines whined to life, a low roar that vibrated through the floorboards. There is a secure exhibit inbox, Sarah said quietly. It is used for remote testimony exhibits. It is not for formal filings. But the clerk, that's me, monitors it during hearings. Give it to me, I said. I pulled a pen from my pocket, uncapping it with my teeth, ready to write on the back of the boarding pass. It is JWC Probate Exhibits Dept 4 at courts.gov, she recited. JWC Probate Exhibits Dept 4, I repeated, at courts.gov. I am not promising anything, Sarah added quickly, but if something comes in before the judge calls the case, I will print it and put it on the stack. That is all I need, I said. Thank you. Sarah, you just saved justice. Good luck. Ms. Castillo, she said, and the line went dead. I looked at the phone. 1 bar of signal. LTE. Ma'am, I need you to put that away. The flight attendant was standing over me now, her smile gone. We are active on the taxiway. 2 seconds, I said, not looking up. I have to send 1 email or I lose my life. She blinked. The sheer intensity of my statement made her pause. She stepped back, giving me a moment of grace I didn't deserve but desperately needed. I didn't have the files ready. I had the raw data. But it wasn't a package. It was a mess of photos and notes in my phone. I opened my email app. My fingers flew across the glass screen. To JWC-probate-exhibits-dept4courts.gov. Subject, urgent, case, 4922, opposition to emergency motion, Jocelyn Castillo. I didn't have time for legal prose. I didn't have time for wherefore the respondent prays. I had to write like a journalist. Headline, facts, proof. I needed to attach the evidence. My hands were shaking. The plane turned, angling toward the runway. The signal indicator flickered from LTE to 4G. It was dying. I tapped the paperclip icon. Attach. Photo of TSA incident card. Attach. Screenshot of cancellation email. Attach. Screenshot of call log. Wait, the call log. I didn't have the police officer's tablet screenshot. I only had my notes. But I had something else. I had the text message my mother sent me 3 minutes ago, which I hadn't opened yet. I swiped down. There it was. Mom, we are doing this for your own good. Jocelyn, the judge will understand that you need help. Stay at the airport. It was an admission. They knew I was at the airport. They knew I was stuck. It proved they knew the plan was to strand me. I took a screenshot. Click. I went back to the email. Attach. Screenshot of text message. I typed the body of the email. It had to be short. It had to be a punch in the face. Dear Judge Harrison, I am not in custody. I am on flight 492. My parents filed a false police report to detain me and canceled my ticket fraudulently to prevent my appearance. The attached evidence proves they are lying to this court to secure an ex parte order. I request to appear telephonically or for the hearing to be held until my arrival at 8:50 a.m. Do not let them steal this. I hit send. The blue bar at the bottom of the screen started to move. Sending. The plane accelerated. The roar of the engines grew to a deafening pitch. Gravity pressed me back into the seat. Sending. The signal bar dropped to 1 dot. Sending. We lifted off. The bump of the wheels leaving the tarmac. The screen flashed. Message sent. I threw the phone into airplane mode instantly, my chest heaving as if I had just run a marathon. I slumped back against the seat, sweat cooling on my forehead. The man next to me stared at me. Everything okay? I looked at him. I looked at the bag under my feet. I looked at the clouds rushing past the window. No, I said. But the email is already gone. I closed my eyes. It was out of my hands now. The email was traveling through the ether, racing the sunrise to Juniper Wells. But I wasn't done. I couldn't be done. I pulled the binder from my bag. I couldn't just rely on Sarah the clerk. I needed to be ready for when I landed. If the judge saw the email, he might pause. He might wait. But he would still demand proof. I opened the binder to the section marked Assets. My parents were trying to paint me as unstable. They were using the mental health angle. I needed to paint them as what they really were. Desperate, indebted, and greedy. I flipped to the credit report I had run on my father last week. Ronan Castillo. FICO. Score, 580. Outstanding judgments. 3. Foreclosure proceedings initiated. They weren't protecting the estate. They were trying to raid it. They needed Grandpa's money to stop their own bleeding. That was the motive. That was the why. I took out a highlighter. I started slashing yellow lines across the page. Debt, debt, debt. The plane climbed through the cloud layer, breaking into the blinding white light of the upper atmosphere. I checked my watch. 6:55. 5 minutes to the hearing. Sarah the clerk was probably walking into the courtroom right now. Was she checking her email? Was the inbox open? Or was she busy chatting with the bailiff? I imagined the scene. My parents sitting at the plaintiff's table. My father in his navy suit, looking solemn. My mother dabbing dry eyes with a tissue. The lawyer, a shark named Mr. Sterling, arranging his papers. Your Honor, Sterling would say, we have a tragic situation today. And then, hopefully, desperately, Sarah would walk in. She would have a piece of paper in her hand. She would whisper to the judge. I stared at the seat back in front of me. Read it. I willed them. Read the email. I was 30,000 feet in the air, traveling at 500 miles per hour, completely helpless. And yet, I had never felt more like a hunter. I uncapped my pen again. I turned to a fresh page in my notebook. I began to write a script, not for a story, but for the cross-examination I hoped I would get to perform. Question 1. Mr. Castillo, what time did you call the TSA this morning? Question 2. Did you or did you not provide my booking reference to the airline? Question 3. Is it true that you are currently 3 months behind on your mortgage? I wrote with a fury that carved grooves into the paper. The flight attendant walked by with the drink cart. Coffee? Water? Water, I said. And a napkin. I needed to clean the sweat off my palms. I had a war to win. The legal countdown had begun. 7 o'clock was ticking closer. Every second was a heartbeat, every minute was a mile, and somewhere in a courtroom in Juniper Wells, a printer was, hopefully, starting to whir. The seatbelt sign chimed off with a soft, electronic ping that sounded far too cheerful for the war I was waging in row 24. I did not relax. I did not order a ginger ale. I pulled my laptop from my bag, the aluminum casing cold against my thighs, and flipped it open. The screen flared to life, illuminating the cramped space. I had sent the flare gun email to the clerk from my phone during takeoff, a desperate scream into the void to stop the gavel from falling. But a scream is not an argument. A scream is not evidence. Now, I had to build the wall. I purchased the Wi-Fi package, $30 for the flight. A price that would have made me wince yesterday, but today felt like penny slots. The connection symbol cycled, searching, buffering, struggling to latch onto a satellite orbiting somewhere in the black vacuum above us. Connected. I opened my email client. I hit compose. I typed the subject line with the precision of a surgeon making an initial incision. Estate hearing. Supplemental exhibits. Travel interference. It was neutral. It was boring. It was designed to look like routine paperwork. The kind that gets opened by a clerk because it looks like it belongs in the file, not the trash. I reached into the side pocket of my bag and pulled out the 3 pieces of paper that were currently the only shield I had against total ruin. First, the incident card from Officer Miller. The white cardstock was bent at the corner where I had jammed it into my pocket. I smoothed it out on the tray table. Incident 2026, Alpha 9. I took a high-resolution photo with my phone, focusing until the handwriting was sharp enough to cut glass. I transferred it to the laptop. Attachment 1. TSA_clearance_report.jpg. Second, the dot matrix printout from Kevin at the airline service desk. The paper was thin, flimsy thermal paper that was already starting to curl. I scanned the lines of text. Internal remarks. Caller, Ronan Castillo. Reason, mental health crisis/self-harm. I circled the timestamp with a red digital marker tool on my screen. 5:32 in the morning. Attachment 2. Airline_internal_logs_fraudulent_cancel. Third, the screenshot of the text message from my mother. We are doing this for your own good. Attachment 3. Admission_of_interference_text.jpg. I looked at the 3 files sitting in the attachment bar. They looked small, just 3 little icons, but they told a story of criminal harassment more clearly than 1,000 pages of testimony. I began to write the body of the email. I did not use emotional language. I did not use exclamation points. I stripped every ounce of Jocelyn the daughter out of the text and left only Jocelyn, the respondent. To the Honorable Court, I, Jocelyn Castillo, submit these exhibits to refute the petitioner's emergency motion for special administration. Exhibit A demonstrates that I was detained by TSA solely based on a malicious tip filed by the petitioner, Ronan Castillo. The incident was investigated and deemed unfounded by federal law enforcement. I was released without charge. Exhibit B demonstrates that the petitioner subsequently impersonated a guardian to fraudulently cancel my flight. Citing false medical claims, this was a calculated act to physically prevent my appearance. Exhibit C contains written admission from the petitioner acknowledging knowledge of my location and intent to obstruct my travel. I am not incapacitated. I am the victim of a coordinated effort to defraud this court. I respectfully request permission to appear telephonically or for the hearing to be held in abeyance until my arrival at 9 o'clock. I read it back. 5 sentences, like 5 bricks stacked to seal a door. I hit send. The progress bar appeared, a thin blue line inching across the bottom of the window. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, dropping 10 feet in a sudden lurch. The man next to me gasped and grabbed the armrest. I didn't blink. I watched the blue line. Sending. 50%. The Wi-Fi signal flickered from 3 bars to 1. "Don't you dare," I whispered. The connection stalled. The blue line froze. My heart hammered against my ribs. a physical thudding that drowned out the engine noise. If this email failed, if it sat in the outbox while Judge Harrison signed the order, it was over. Sending. The line jumped. Message sent. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a year. I didn't stop. I couldn't trust email alone. Email is passive. I needed a voice. I pulled out my phone again. I enabled Wi-Fi calling. I knew it was technically against the airline's policy to make voice calls, but I was past the point of caring about flight attendant etiquette. I put in my earbuds, hiding the wire under my hair, and dialed Marissa Klein. Marissa was my grandfather's lawyer. She was 60 years old, wore suits that looked like armor, and had a voice like gravel in a blender. She was the only person in Juniper Wells who hadn't been bought or charmed by my father. The line rang. Once, twice. Castillo? Her voice was a harsh whisper. She was in court. Marissa, I said, keeping my voice low, barely audible over the hum of the cabin. Did you get the email? I am standing in the back of the courtroom, Marissa hissed. They just called the case. Your father is up there right now. He is putting on a performance. Jocelyn. He is crying. He is telling Judge Harrison that he tried to save you, but you were too far gone. The email, I repeated. I sent the proof, the police report, the airline logs. I haven't checked my inbox. I am listening to him lie, she snapped. Hold on. I heard the rustle of fabric, the sound of her moving. They are asking for temporary powers. Jocelyn, Marissa said, her voice urgent. They are arguing that the estate is melting ice. They say there are tax liabilities that need immediate signature. They want the checkbook. Today. They want to drain it, I said. They have 3 judgments against them. They are broke. Marissa. I know that. You know that, she said. But the judge sees 2 grieving parents and an empty chair where the heir should be. He is leaning. Jocelyn. I can see it in his body language. He is reaching for the pen. Interrupt him, I said. Object. Do whatever you have to do. I can't object to a scheduling issue if you aren't here, she whispered furiously. I need something substantive. They are attacking the will. Jocelyn. They are saying the old man was senile when he signed the amendment. They are saying he didn't know it was a will. They have an affidavit from a nurse saying he was confused that week. He wasn't confused, I said. He was sharper than anyone. It's he said, she said, Marissa said. And the he is dead. No, I said. It isn't. I reached down and unzipped my bag. I pulled out the heavy, black binder. I flipped past the will, past the birth certificate. I opened the section tabbed Notary. Marissa, I said. Do you remember the notary we used? The forensic one? Brenda? Expensive. Thorough. What about her? I have her journal, I said. Silence on the line. You have the stamp log? Marissa asked. Better, I said. I have the narrative journal, and I have the video transcript confirmation. I ran my finger down the page of the logbook. It was a grid of handwritten notes, ink pressed hard into the paper. Listen to this, I whispered, reading from the page. Date, November 12th. Time, 2:30 p.m. Subject, Arthur Castillo. Notes, subject is alert. Oriented ×4. Subject told a joke about a horse in a bar. Subject specifically asked, does this amendment definitely cut Ronan out? Subject corrected a spelling error on page 3, line 4. Subject thumbprinted the entry. I heard Marissa inhale sharply. You have a contemporaneous handwritten note of him correcting a typo? She asked. Yes. That proves capacity, she said. Her voice changed. The panic was gone, replaced by the cold, sharp edge of a weapon being drawn. If he was correcting typos, he was reading. If he was cracking jokes, he wasn't catatonic. That kills the nurse's affidavit. I have it right here, I said. Page 42. I need it, Marissa said. I need it on the judge's bench in 2 minutes. If I walk up there with a story, he will ignore me. If I walk up there with a document, he has to look. I am on a plane, I said. Scan it, she commanded. Use your phone. High contrast. PDF. Send it to the clerk's exhibit inbox and copy me. Do it now. Jocelyn, he is picking up the pen. I am on it. I hung up. I threw the laptop open wider. I grabbed my phone. I opened the scanning app. My hands were shaking, but I forced them to still. I placed the journal on the tray table. The overhead light was dim, creating shadows. Flash. I took a picture of the cover. Flash. I took a picture of the certification page. Flash. I took a picture of the entry. November 12th. The thumbprint. The handwriting that saved my life. I cropped the edges. I adjusted the brightness until the blue ink stood out like neon against the white paper. Convert to PDF. I named the file. Exhibit_D_forensic_ notary_journal_capacity_proof.pdf. I went back to the email thread. I hit reply all. Subject: Second supplemental exhibit. Proof of testamentary capacity. Attached: Sworn forensic notary, Journal of Arthur Castillo. Content: Direct evidence of decedent's lucidity. Specific intent to disinherit petitioners. An active engagement in drafting process. Note: This document contradicts the petitioner's claims of incapacity. I hit send. The blue line appeared again. This time, I didn't watch it. I couldn't. I looked out the window at the sea of clouds. White and endless. Go. I thought. Fly faster than the plane. The screen flashed. Message sent. I stared at the timestamp. 7:12 a.m. 12 minutes into the hearing, I sat back, my hands empty. I had fired every bullet. I had thrown every grenade. There was nothing left in the bag. There was nothing left to do but wait. The man next to me was looking at me again. He looked at the legal documents spread out on my tray table, the intense look on my face. Lawyer? He asked. Defendant, I said. He nodded slowly and went back to his movie. My phone screen was dark. I tapped it. Nothing. 1 minute passed. 2 minutes passed. The silence was louder than the engines. Had Sarah seen it? Had she printed it? Or was it sitting in a digital queue, waiting for a refresh that would come too late? My phone buzzed. A text message. From Marissa. I grabbed it, my heart jumping into my throat. It wasn't from Marissa. It was from an unknown number. A local area code. Juniper Wells. I opened it. Sender: Clerk of Court, Department 4. Message: The judge has paused the proceedings. He is reviewing the exhibits in chambers. He has ordered the petitioners to sit down. Counsel Klein has been heard. Remain available by phone. Do not disconnect. I read the message 3 times. Paused. He hadn't signed. He had stopped. The pen had hovered, and then it had been put down. I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. The tears I had been holding back since the security checkpoint finally pricked at the corners of my eyes. They hadn't won. Not yet. I looked at the phone. Remain available. I wasn't going anywhere. I was strapped to a chair in the sky, hurtling toward them at 500 miles an hour. I am here, I whispered to the phone. I am right here. The phone in my hand vibrated. A sharp, buzzing jolt that cut through the low hum of the cabin pressure. It was not a text message this time. It was a call. The screen displayed a generic, terrifying label. No caller ID. I did not hesitate. I accepted the call and pressed the phone against my ear, burying the device under my hair so the flight attendant 2 rows down would not see the glowing screen. Castillo, I whispered. You are on speaker. Marissa's voice came through. It sounded distant, tinny, and wrapped in the hollow echo of a large room with high ceilings. The judge has the exhibits. He is back on the bench. Listen. She must have placed her phone on the defense table. Face up. The audio quality shifted. I could hear the shuffling of papers, the distinct clack of a water pitcher being set down on wood, and the heavy silence that fills a courtroom when a judge is reading. I closed my eyes. I was no longer in seat 24 Bravo. I was there, standing invisibly beside Marissa, watching the dust motes float in the filtered light of the Juniper Wells courthouse. Mr. Castillo, a deep, resonant voice boomed. It was Judge Harrison. I remembered that voice from the preliminary hearings months ago. It was a voice that did not ask questions. It demanded facts. You stated in your opening remarks that your daughter was unavailable today due to incarceration. Is that correct? There was a pause. I could hear my father clearing his throat. The sound was wet and nervous. Not incarceration, Your Honor, my father said. His voice was trembling, pitch perfect for the role of the distraught parent he was playing. But custody, detention, she was hysterical at the airport. My wife and I received a call. They said she was making threats. They said she had to be removed from the line. He was improvising. He was trying to bridge the gap between the lie he told 10 minutes ago and the document the judge was holding now. Removed how? Judge Harrison asked. The tone was dangerously flat. Physically, Your Honor, my father continued, his voice gaining a desperate kind of momentum. They had to restrain her. She was screaming about the money, about how we were stealing from her. It was humiliating. She was dragged away in handcuffs. Your Honor, in front of everyone. My blood went cold. Handcuffs? He had gone too far. If he had just said detained, he might have had wiggle room. But handcuffs was a specific, physical claim. It was a verifiable fact, and it was a lie. I gripped the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't interrupt. I just spoke 2 words into the microphone, loud enough for Marissa to hear, quiet enough to stay on the plane. Incident code, I commanded. I heard Marissa shift. I heard her voice, sharp and cutting. Project into the room. Your Honor, Marissa said, if I may direct the court's attention to Supplemental Exhibit A, sent to the clerk just moments ago, this is the official federal incident report regarding the event Mr. Castillo is describing. I am looking at it, Judge Harrison said. Does the report mention handcuffs, Your Honor? Marissa asked. There was a silence, the kind of silence that has weight. I could imagine the judge's eyes scanning the white cardstock image I had photographed on my tray table. Clerk, the judge said, read the disposition field of Exhibit A into the record. Another voice, female and professional, Sarah, my savior, spoke up. Disposition. Subject cooperative. Sarah read. Her voice was clear, cutting through the static. No contraband found. No threats verified. Subject released without restriction. No restraints utilized. Status, unfounded. No restraints utilized. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Unfounded, Judge Harrison repeated. That means it didn't happen. Mr. Castillo, it means your daughter was not dragged away. She was not cuffed. She was harassed. I was told, my father stammered. The smooth, oily confidence was gone. He sounded small. The officer on the phone said, Which officer? Judge Harrison snapped. Because this report says the tip came from you. I heard the rustle of a suit moving. That would be Mr. Sterling, my parents' lawyer, trying to physically distance himself from his client. Your Honor, Sterling's voice came in, smooth and apologetic. We filed the emergency motion based on the information provided by our client in good faith. We were under the impression that Ms. Castillo was in federal custody and therefore unable to protect her interests in this estate. Good faith? The judge asked. The skepticism was dripping from the syllable. Mr. Sterling, look at Exhibit B, the airline log. I held my breath. This was the second strike. Read the internal remarks. Clerk, the judge ordered. Sarah's voice returned. Caller verified as Ronan Castillo. Caller requested cancellation of ticket number 006. Reason given, passenger is mentally unstable and a risk of self-harm at altitude. Refund process to original payment method. Risk of self-harm, the judge repeated. He let the words sit there. Mr. Castillo, did you tell this court 10 minutes ago that you canceled her ticket to save her from legal trouble? I was trying to protect her, my father said. He was drowning now. She isn't well, Your Honor. She isn't thinking clearly. I didn't want her to get on a plane and do something. So you impersonated her? The judge asked. You called the airline, pretended to have authority you do not possess, and canceled a flight for a grown woman who is the primary beneficiary of this estate? I am her father, Ronan shouted. It was a crack in the facade. The anger was leaking out. I have a right to stop her from ruining this family. You have no such right, Judge Harrison said. His voice dropped an octave, losing the interrogative tone and entering the judicial territory of judgment. You are a petitioner in a probate case. She is a respondent. In this room, you are equals. And outside this room, she is a 34-year-old citizen of the United States. The audio feed crackled. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, desperate not to miss a syllable. Ms. Klein, the judge said. Is your client on the line? She is, Your Honor, Marissa said. She is currently at 30,000 feet, on Flight 492. Ms. Castillo, the judge called out. I took a deep breath. I needed to sound calm. I needed to sound like the opposite of the hysterical woman my father had described. I am here, Your Honor, I said. My voice was steady, despite the adrenaline shaking my hands. Are you in handcuffs? He asked. No, Your Honor. Are you in a state of mental crisis? I am in a state of frustration. Your Honor, I said, but I am perfectly lucid. I am currently reviewing the notary journal on my laptop. The notary journal, the judge said. Exhibit D. Yes, Your Honor. The document that proves my grandfather knew exactly what he was doing when he signed his will. I heard papers shuffling again. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, your motion for emergency special administration relies entirely on two prongs. 1, that the decedent was incapacitated. 2, that the heir is absent and unstable. It appears both prongs have just been snapped off. Your Honor, we still believe, Sterling began. Stop. The judge cut him off. Just stop. The silence returned. It lasted for 5 seconds, then 10. Here is the ruling on the emergency motion, Judge Harrison said. I closed my eyes. Please. The petitioner's request to be appointed special administrators is denied. The judge declared. I let out a breath that fogged the window of the plane. The court finds that the representations made regarding the respondent's status were materially false, the judge continued. Furthermore, the court finds the evidence of interference with the respondent's travel to be deeply concerning. Mr. Castillo, you are skating on the edge of a sanctions hearing that will make your head spin. But the estate, my father protested. The taxes. Who will sign the checks? The estate has survived for 3 months without you touching it. It can survive another 3 hours, Judge Harrison said. I am appointing a temporary neutral administrator from the court's panel, Mr. Henderson, to hold the keys until I make a final ruling on the will. Objection, Sterling shouted. Mr. Henderson charges $400 an hour. Then perhaps your client should not have wasted the court's time with a fraudulent emergency hearing, the judge countered. Mr. Henderson is appointed effective immediately. He will secure the assets. Now, the judge said, regarding the hearing on the merits of the will. Yes, Your Honor? Marissa asked. I am keeping the docket open, Judge Harrison said. Ms. Castillo, what time does your flight land? 8:10. Your Honor, I said. I can be at the courthouse by 9. Drive carefully, the judge said. Do not speed. The court will wait. We will reconvene at 9:30. I want Ms. Castillo in this room, in person, with that original notary journal. I will be there, I promised. And Mr. Sterling, the judge added, his voice sharpening like a knife. You will instruct your clients to sit down and remain in this building. If they leave, I will issue a bench warrant. We are going to settle the matter of the will, and then we are going to have a very long conversation about who called the airport police. Understood. Your Honor? Sterling mumbled. Court is in recess until 9:30, the judge said. Bang. The gavel strike was dull over the phone speaker, but it hit me with the force of a physical blow. Jocelyn? Marissa's voice came back on the line. She picked up the phone. Did you hear that? I heard it, I said. He appointed a neutral. He blocked them, Marissa said. She sounded giddy, a rare emotion for her. He stopped the bleed. They can't touch the accounts. Henderson is a bulldog. He will lock everything down in 10 minutes. They looked bad, didn't they? I asked. Bad? Marissa laughed. A short, sharp bark. Jocelyn, your father looked like he was trying to swallow a lemon whole. When that airline log came out, the air went out of the room. You turned the judge. He isn't just neutral now. He is suspicious. He knows he was being played. I am landing in 40 minutes, I said. I have the rental car booked. Get here, Marissa said. Bring the journal. We have the momentum. We are going to crush the incapacity claim, and we are going to walk out of here with the letters of administration. Marissa, I said, watch them. Don't let them leave. There is a bailiff standing between them and the door, she said. They aren't going anywhere. They are trapped in the box they built for you. I will see you at 9:30, I said. I ended the call. I pulled the earbuds out of my ears. The hum of the plane rushed back in, replacing the tension of the courtroom. I looked around the cabin. The man in the fleece jacket was asleep. The teenager was nodding his head to music. The flight attendant was collecting trash. Normalcy. They had no idea that 10 seconds ago. A multi-million-dollar estate had just been saved from looting by a text message and a PDF. I looked down at my hands. They were still shaking, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was the aftershock of adrenaline. My father had stood up in open court and lied about handcuffs. He had gambled everything on the idea that I would be silent, that I would be absent, that I would be erased. He forgot the one thing my grandfather had taught me when we played chess on Sunday afternoons. Never checkmate a king until you are sure the queen isn't watching. I looked at the flight tracker on the screen in front of me. We were crossing the state line. The altitude was dropping. 25,000 feet. 20,000 feet. The descent had begun. I opened the binder again. I didn't need to look at the notary journal anymore. I knew it was safe. I flipped to the back, to the section I had labeled counterattack. I took out my pen. I wrote down a new name. Mr. Henderson, the neutral administrator. I needed to be ready for him too. I needed to show him I wasn't just the heir. I was the most competent person to manage the legacy. I wasn't just coming to claim the money. I was coming to claim the responsibility. The plane banked left, and through the window, I saw the brown and green patchwork of the valley floor. Far in the distance, a cluster of buildings caught the morning sun. Juniper Wells. I was coming down, and I was bringing the storm with me. The seatbelt sign flicked back on with a sharp electronic ping. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, announcing our initial descent into the Denver area. He sounded calm, professional, and completely detached from the reality that my life was currently dangling by a thread in a courtroom 300 miles away. I should have felt relieved. The judge had paused the hearing. He had denied the emergency motion for special administration. He had appointed a neutral third party. In the game of legal chess, I had just blocked their checkmate and taken a pawn. I should have been closing my eyes, taking a deep breath, and preparing for the drive. But the phone in my hand felt heavy, like a loaded weapon that hadn't finished firing. Marissa had told me to remain available. She hadn't hung up. She had just muted the line. I could see the timer counting on the screen. 34 minutes and 20 seconds. The silence from her end was thick with the ambient noise of a courtroom in recess. The squeak of chairs. The distant murmur of bailiffs. The shuffling of papers. Then, the mute icon flickered off. Jocelyn, Marissa said. Her voice was different. The triumph I had heard 5 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a low, urgent frequency that made the hair on my arms stand up. Are you sitting down? I am strapped into seat 24 Bravo, I said, my stomach tightening. Marissa, what happened? Did the judge come back? The judge is still in chambers, Marissa said quickly, but the clerk just updated the digital file. While we were arguing about the flight cancellation, your father's lawyer slipped another document into the stack. It was filed time-stamped at 6:59 a.m., 1 minute before the hearing started. I just got the notification on my iPad. What document? I asked. They already filed for special administration. That was denied. This isn't about the estate. Jocelyn, Marissa said. This is a petition for temporary guardianship of the person and estate. The cabin air seemed to vanish. Guardianship. I knew that word. Every lawyer knows that word. It is the nuclear option in family law. It is the legal mechanism used to strip an adult of their civil rights. Their right to vote. Their right to marry. Their right to access their own bank accounts. And their right to hire a lawyer. Because they are deemed mentally incapacitated. They aren't just trying to take the money, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow to the chest. They are trying to take me. The petition alleges that you are suffering from, and I am quoting here, acute delusional episodes regarding family wealth and paranoid ideation. Marissa read. It claims you are a danger to yourself and that you are incapable of managing your own affairs. They are asking the court to appoint Ronan Castillo as your temporary guardian immediately, pending a psychiatric evaluation. They can't do that, I said, my voice rising. The man next to me shifted, but I didn't care. I am 34 years old. I have a job. I pay taxes. I just outsmarted them with a federal police report. Does that sound like a delusional person? That is the problem, Marissa said. They are using the airport incident against you in a different way. They are spinning it. They are saying your paranoia about them prompted you to create a scene. But Jocelyn, that is not the worst part. To file an emergency guardianship, they need a physician's letter or a clinical evaluation, and they have one. That is impossible, I said. I haven't seen a doctor in 2 years, and that was for a sinus infection. I am looking at an attachment labeled clinical assessment, Marissa said. It is on letterhead from a place called the Sunrise Wellness and Behavioral Center. It is dated 4 days ago. It says you underwent a telehealth evaluation and displayed signs of severe manic behavior. It is signed by a Dr. Eris Thorne. My mind raced. Sunrise Wellness? Dr. Thorne? I had never heard of these names. I had never done a telehealth session. Marissa, that is a forgery, I said. I have never spoken to a Dr. Thorne in my life. 4 days ago, I was at work. I have timesheets. I have witnesses. I know it is fake, Marissa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. But I am looking at this document, Jocelyn, and it is dangerous. It has your correct social security number. It has your correct medical history, the allergy to penicillin, the broken wrist from high school. It looks real enough to survive a quick glance from a busy judge. I closed my eyes, trying to breathe through the sudden spike of panic. They had my medical history. How? And then, the memory surfaced, sharp and clear. It was last week, Tuesday night. My mother had invited me to dinner. It was a peace offering. She had said, a roast chicken dinner at their house. The atmosphere had been tense but civil. After dessert. While my father was checking emails in the study, my mother had slid a piece of paper across the kitchen island. We are just worried about you. Honey, she had said, her voice dripping with that suffocating, weaponized concern. You have been so stressed about Grandpa's death. We found this wonderful counselor. He works with grief. We just want you to talk to someone. Just sign the consent form so we can set up an appointment for you. I hadn't signed it. I had pushed it back. I had told her I was fine. I had told her I didn't need their doctor. But I had left my purse on the counter when I went to the bathroom. I had left my wallet in the purse, my insurance card, my old medical ID. They stole my information, I said. Last week, at dinner, they tried to get me to sign a consent form, and when I refused, they must have copied my insurance card and found a doctor willing to write a report for cash. I am looking up this Sunrise Wellness, Marissa said. I could hear her typing furiously in the background. Jocelyn, the address is a mailbox rental store in a strip mall in Nevada. And this Dr. Thorne? His license is on probation in 2 states for overprescribing. It is a mill, I said. They bought a diagnosis. I am going to move to strike this, Marissa said. But the fact that they filed it means they are desperate. They are throwing everything at the wall. If the judge grants even a temporary guardianship, They can fire me. They become your legal voice. They can dismiss the probate case on your behalf. They want to silence me, I said. They don't want to fight. They want a deletion. I am going to approach the bench as soon as the judge comes out, Marissa said. I am going to demand an evidentiary hearing on the provenance of this document. I am going to ask for a subpoena of this Dr. Thorne. But Jocelyn, you need to be prepared. When you walk into that courtroom, they are going to try to provoke you. They want you to scream. They want you to cry. They want the judge to see the unstable woman described in this fake report. I won't break, I said. I will be ice. Hold on, Marissa said. The bailiff is signaling. The judge is coming back. I listened. I heard the door open. I heard the all rise. Be seated, Judge Harrison said. His voice was tighter now, less patient. Ms. Klein, the judge said, I have reviewed the late filing from the petitioners regarding the guardianship matter. Your Honor, we object to the filing, Marissa said instantly. It is baseless. The medical report is of dubious origin, and the timing is clearly prejudicial. I am not ruling on the guardianship today, Judge Harrison cut in. That is a separate docket. However, given the serious nature of the allegations, both the allegations of instability against the respondent and the allegations of fraud against the petitioners, I am setting ground rules. He paused. Any further ex parte motions filed without 48 hours' notice to the opposing party will be summarily denied, the judge ordered. And regarding this medical report, Mr. Sterling, you are ordered to produce the original clinical notes and the metadata for the telehealth session by 5 o'clock today. If this doctor is a ghost, your client is going to be answering to the district attorney, not just me. Understood, Your Honor, Sterling replied, his voice barely audible. We are still reconvening at 9:30 on the probate matter, the judge said. Ms. Castillo is still the respondent. She is still a free agent. Unless I see clear and convincing evidence otherwise, this guardianship petition is just paper. Do not test me. Mr. Castillo. Marissa, I whispered. He didn't dismiss it. He can't dismiss it without a hearing, Marissa whispered back. Due process works both ways, but he handcuffed them. He wants proof. I have to go, I said. The flight attendants are walking down the aisle for final checks. I have to turn the phone off. Get here, Marissa said. Drive safe. We fight at 9:30. I hung up. I shoved the phone into my pocket, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. They had failed to stop the flight. They had failed to get the special administration. So now, they were trying to declare me insane. It was a special kind of violation. It made me feel dirty, exposed, and hunted. My phone vibrated again. I pulled it out, shielding the screen. It was a text message. From Dad. I stared at the name. I hadn't spoken to him in 3 weeks. I opened the message. You can run to the court, but you can't run from your own mind. We will prove you are incompetent. We have the history. We have the journals you left when you were 16. We will destroy you to save you. I read it twice. The journals you left when you were 16. They went through my childhood room. They dug up the angst-filled diaries of a teenager coping with high school and hormones. And they were planning to read them into the public record as evidence of long-term instability. It was a twist I hadn't seen coming. They were willing to burn my entire life, past and present, to get what they wanted. I felt a surge of nausea. For a second, I wanted to curl up in the seat and let the plane take me somewhere else, anywhere else. I wanted to disappear. We will destroy you to save you. It was the logic of abusers everywhere. I looked at the black binder under the seat. My defense. My shield. But a shield wasn't enough anymore. You can't block a guardianship petition with a defense. You have to attack. You have to show that the people filing it are not concerned parents, but predators. I reached into the front pocket of the binder. My fingers brushed against the thick, textured paper of an envelope I had carried for 3 months but never looked at closely. It was a cream-colored envelope, sealed with red wax. My grandfather was dramatic like that. He loved the old ways. He loved fountain pens and wax seals and honor. He had given it to me 2 days before he died. He was weak then. His voice barely a whisper. "Jocelyn," he had said, "this is for the end. Only for the end." "What is it?" I had asked. "If they play fair, you burn this." He had told me. "If they accept the will, you never open it. But if they hunt you, if they try to stop you from entering the courthouse, if they try to say, 'I was crazy' or 'you are crazy,'" he had gripped my hand, his skin paper thin. "Then you give this to the judge." I pulled the envelope out. It sat on my lap, stark against the dark fabric of my jeans. I had been afraid to open it. I was afraid it would be a letter of disappointment, or a letter of instruction that was too hard to follow. But the text message from my father was still glowing in my mind. "We will destroy you." They had crossed the line. They had crossed every line. There was no going back to Thanksgiving dinners or awkward Christmas calls. There was only war. I slid my thumb under the flap of the envelope. The wax seal cracked with a sharp snap that sounded like a bone breaking. I pulled out the document inside. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a note of encouragement. It was a single sheet of legal parchment, folded in thirds. On the outside of the folded paper, in my grandfather's shaky but distinct handwriting, was a single sentence. "If they stop you from entering the courthouse, hand this to the judge and do not speak." I stared at the words. He knew. He had sat in his study, dying, and he had looked at his son, my father, and he had known. He knew exactly what Ronan Castillo was capable of. He knew the greed. He knew the ruthlessness. He had prepared a trap. I didn't need to read the legal text inside. I didn't need to parse the clauses or the statutes. I knew what this was. In the world of trusts and estates, there is a weapon more powerful than a will. There is a poison pill. My parents were fighting for control of the trust. They were fighting to be the trustees. They thought if they removed me, the money would default to them as the next of kin, but Grandpa had anticipated the checkmate. I held the document in my hands. It felt warm. I looked out the window. The ground was close now. I could see the cars on the highway, tiny specks moving in lines. I wasn't just a defendant anymore. I wasn't just a daughter trying to defend her sanity. I was the executioner. I took a deep breath, slipped the document back into the envelope, and placed it carefully in the very front of my bag, right next to the notary journal. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Denver," the pilot said. "Please remain seated." The wheels touched the tarmac with a screech of rubber and a heavy thud. The plane shuddered, slowing down. Fighting the momentum, I grabbed my phone. I didn't reply to my father. I didn't block him. I deleted the text thread. I didn't need to argue with him. I didn't need to prove I was sane to him. I just needed to walk into that courtroom, look him in the eye, and hand Judge Harrison the envelope. The plane taxied toward the gate. I unbuckled my seatbelt the second the light turned off. I stood up. I pulled my bag onto my shoulder. "Excuse me," I said to the man in the aisle seat. "I have a court date." He looked at my face, at the cold, hard determination that must have been etched there, and he moved faster than he had the entire flight. I walked into the aisle. The game was over. They just didn't know it yet. The rental car smelled of pine air freshener and stale cigarette smoke, a sensory assault that somehow helped keep me awake as I navigated the highway out of the airport. I did not drive to the house where I grew up. I did not drive to the cul-de-sac with the manicured lawn and the weeping willow tree where my father used to push me on a tire swing. That house was no longer a home. It was the headquarters of the opposition. Instead, I drove straight to the Motel 6 3 blocks from the county courthouse. It was a nondescript building with beige stucco and a flickering neon sign. The kind of place where people stayed when they were in trouble or in transit. Marissa was waiting for me in room 114. When she opened the door, the smell of cheap coffee and printer toner hit me. The room had been transformed. The 2 double beds were covered in files. A portable printer sat on the desk, humming with heat. Marissa looked tired, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. but her eyes were bright with the manic energy of a lawyer who smells blood in the water. "You look like hell," she said, pulling me into a hug that was brief, fierce, and smelled of lavender laundry detergent. "I feel like I just ran a marathon in a minefield," I said, dropping my bag onto the carpet. "But I made it." "You made it," she confirmed. "And now, we are going to bury them." We did not sleep. There was no time for sleep. The sun was going to rise in 4 hours, and we had to build a narrative that was bulletproof. Marissa had turned the wall above the desk into a war room. She had taped up sheets of paper, connecting them with a black marker. It was a timeline of the last 12 hours, laid out in brutal, chronological order. "Look at it," Marissa said, pointing with a pen. "When you see it all at once, it isn't just harassment, it is a conspiracy." I stepped closer. The timeline started at 4 in the morning. Item 1, 4:17 a.m., false security report, filed by Ronan Castillo. Item 2, 4:45 a.m., Jocelyn detained by TSA. Item 3, 5:32 a.m., Flight 72. 4 canceled by Ronan Castillo impersonating a guardian. Item 4, 6:30 a.m., emergency motion for special administration filed, citing absence. Item 5, 6:59 a.m., petition for guardianship filed, citing instability. "It is an escalation ladder," I said, tracing the line with my finger. "They tried to stop me physically. When that failed. They tried to stop me logistically. When that failed, they tried to stop me legally. And when they realized I was still coming, they tried to stop me medically." "Exactly," Marissa said. "We are going to present this to Judge Harrison just like this. We are going to show him that the guardianship petition wasn't a concern for your health. It was the final desperate move of people who were losing control." She handed me a stack of papers. "I printed the email you sent from the plane. The resolution on the text message screenshot is perfect. We will destroy you to save you. That line is going to hang your father." I looked at the documents. They were cold, hard facts, but I knew my parents. Facts had never stopped them before. They would cry. They would manipulate. They would say they did it out of love. "I have one more thing," I said. I walked over to my bag. I reached into the front pocket and pulled out the cream-colored envelope with the red wax seal. The room went quiet. Marissa lowered her pen. "Is that what I think it is?" she asked softly. "Grandpa gave it to me 2 days before he died," I said. "He told me to open it only if they tried to stop me. He told me to give it to the judge if they played dirty." Marissa walked over and looked at the seal. It was unbroken. The red wax was stamped with his initials, AC, in the old script he used for his personal stationery. "It is a holographic codicil," Marissa guessed, her voice hushed with professional reverence. "Or a letter of instruction. If it is notarized—" "It is," I said. "I can feel the embossed stamp through the paper." "If it is a codicil, it overrides the previous terms," Marissa said, her mind racing through the statutes. "Do you know what it says?" "No," I said. "He told me not to read it unless I had to. He said, if they accept the will, you burn this, but if they hunt you, you use it." I looked at the envelope. It felt heavy in my hand, heavier than a piece of paper should be. It felt like his hand on my shoulder. "I remember what he said to me that day," I told Marissa. I could hear his voice clearly in the quiet hotel room, rasping but firm. He was sitting in his leather chair, the one by the window. He looked out at the garden and said, "Jocelyn, I do not fear death. Death is just a bill coming due. I fear the living making me an excuse for their own sins. I fear them using my name to tear you apart." I looked up at Marissa. He knew. He knew they would do this. He knew they would try to say he was crazy, or that I was crazy. He prepared this for exactly this moment. "Then we use it," Marissa said. "We don't open it here. We don't break that seal. We let the judge break it. It makes the evidence stronger. It shows you followed his instructions to the letter." "Okay," I said. We use it. We spent the next 3 hours organizing the binders. We labeled the exhibits. We highlighted the relevant statutes. We drank stale coffee and ate vending machine crackers. By the time the sun began to bleed through the cheap curtains, painting the room in shades of gray and orange, I was no longer the frantic woman running through an airport. I was calm. I was cold. I was ready. I went into the bathroom and changed. I put on the navy blue suit I had packed in my carry-on. It was wrinkled, but I didn't care. I brushed my hair back, tying it tight. I washed my face, scrubbing away the airport grime and the tear tracks. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a victim. I saw a Castillo, but not the kind my parents were. I saw the kind my grandfather was. "Time to go," Marissa said from the door. We drove the 3 blocks to the courthouse in silence. The Juniper Wells County Courthouse was an imposing building of red brick and white pillars, built in the 1920s to look like a temple of justice. Usually, walking up those steps made me feel small. Today, I felt like I was bringing the fire to the mountain. We walked through the security checkpoint. The metal detector beeped for the person in front of me, but when I walked through, it remained silent. I picked up my bag from the belt, the bag containing the timeline, the notary journal, and the sealed envelope, and nodded to the deputy. "Good morning," I said. "Morning, ma'am," he replied. He had no idea. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway was crowded with lawyers and clients. A sea of anxious faces and billable hours, and there they were. Standing outside the double doors of courtroom 4B were my parents. My father was wearing his Sunday best suit, the one he wore to funerals and board meetings. He looked older than I remembered, his face drawn and pale. My mother was next to him, wearing a cardigan and clutching a tissue to her nose. She looked fragile, like a glass ornament about to shatter. It was a perfect tableau of grieving, worried parents. Then they saw me. For a split second, the mask slipped. My father's eyes narrowed, and I saw the flash of pure, unadulterated anger. It was the look of a man who is used to controlling the board and realizes a pawn has just moved on its own. But then, the mask slid back into place. "Jocelyn!" my mother cried out, her voice pitching up so the nearby lawyers would hear. She took a step toward me, arms open. "Oh, thank God. We were so worried. Where have you been?" I stopped. I didn't step back, but I didn't step forward. I stood my ground, creating a visible barrier of empty space between us. "I have been at the airport, Mother," I said. My voice was low, devoid of emotion. "Dealing with the flight cancellation you arranged. We just wanted you safe," my father said. Stepping in, his voice was deep, authoritative. The voice he used to scold me when I was 10. "You sounded so manic on the phone. We had to do something." "Save it for the judge, Ronan," Marissa cut in, stepping between us like a bodyguard. "We are not doing this in the hallway. We are just trying to help her," my father said to Marissa, his tone pleading. "She is not well. Look at her. She is exhausted. She is making things up." "I am not making up the police report," I said. "And I am not making up the cancellation log. And I am certainly not making up the text message where you threatened to destroy me." My father flinched. He hadn't expected me to have the text. He probably thought I had deleted it in a fit of rage. "We will see what the judge thinks about your evidence," he hissed, leaning in close. "You are embarrassing the family." "The family embarrassed itself when you committed a felony this morning," I replied. The bailiff opened the double doors. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harrison." We filed in. My parents took the table on the left, the petitioner's table. Marissa and I took the table on the right, the respondent's table. The courtroom was exactly as I remembered it from the phone call, but high definition. The wood paneling was dark. The seal of the state hung heavy behind the bench, and Judge Harrison sat up high, a man in a black robe who looked like he had not had enough coffee to deal with the Castillo family drama. He looked at my parents. He looked at me. "Good morning," Judge Harrison said. "We are back on the record in the matter of the estate of Arthur Castillo." The record will reflect that the respondent, Jocelyn Castillo, is now present in the courtroom. He looked at me over his reading glasses. Ms. Castillo, you made good time. I had a lot of motivation, Your Honor, I said, standing up. Sit down, he said. We have a lot to get through. He turned to Mr. Sterling. Counsel, before the recess, you were arguing that the decedent lacked capacity and that the respondent was unfit to serve. You filed a guardianship petition at 6:59 this morning to support that claim. Do you stand by that filing? Sterling stood up. He looked uncomfortable. He knew the ground was shifting under his feet. Your Honor, my clients are deeply concerned, Sterling began. The events of this morning, the confusion at the airport, it all points to a pattern of instability. We believe the guardianship is necessary to protect Ms. Castillo from the stress of this litigation. My mother let out a small, audible sob. We just love her so much, she whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. It was a good performance. If I hadn't been the one they were hunting, I might have believed it. Marissa stood up. She didn't look at my parents. She looked straight at the judge. Your Honor, this is not love, Marissa said. This is a siege. She picked up the timeline we had created in the hotel room. We have prepared a demonstrative exhibit for the court, Marissa said. It outlines the sequence of interference that occurred between 4 a.m. and 7 a.m. today. We request permission to approach and distribute copies. Approach, the judge said. Marissa walked up and handed a copy to the clerk, a copy to Sterling, and a copy to the judge. Your Honor, if you look at the timeline, Marissa said, you will see that every single action taken by the petitioners was designed to manufacture the very instability they now claim to be worried about. They poke the bear, and when the bear growls, they call animal control. We also have emotion, Marissa continued, her voice gaining strength. We move for an immediate order of preservation. We want an order requiring the petitioners to preserve all call logs, all text messages, all emails, and all billing records from their attorneys relating to the flight cancellation and the airport tip. We believe these records will show a criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice. Sterling jumped up. Objection. That is a fishing expedition, and it violates attorney-client privilege. It is not privilege if it is in furtherance of a crime, Judge Harrison said sharply. The fraud exception applies. Mr. Sterling, if your clients used your phone to cancel her ticket, that is not privileged. That is evidence. The judge looked at my father. My father was staring at the timeline on the table, his face turning a blotchy red. I am going to hear all of this, Judge Harrison said. I am going to hear the arguments on the will. I am going to hear the arguments on the guardianship, and I am going to hear the arguments on sanctions. He turned his gaze to me. But first, the judge said, Ms. Castillo mentioned a document. During the telephonic appearance, you stated you had a sealed envelope from the decedent. Yes, Your Honor, I said, standing up again. And you stated it was to be opened only if there was interference, the judge said. That was my grandfather's instruction, I said. He said, if they stop you, give this to the judge. Well, Judge Harrison said, gesturing to the empty space on the bench in front of him, they certainly tried to stop you. Bring it up here. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. My mother stopped crying. My father stopped glaring. Every eye in the room was fixed on my hands. I reached into my bag. I bypassed the binder. I bypassed the notary journal. I pulled out the cream-colored envelope. The red wax seal caught the overhead lights. I walked past the bar. I walked past the counsel tables. I felt the gaze of my parents on my back. A burning weight. I approached the bench. The bailiff moved to intercept, but the judge waved him off. I placed the envelope on the polished wood surface. It looked small against the vastness of the judicial bench. It has not been opened? The judge asked. No, Your Honor, I said. The seal is intact, and you do not know what is inside? I can guess, I said. But I do not know. Judge Harrison picked up the envelope. He ran his thumb over the wax. He inspected the back. He inspected the front. Then, he reached for his letter opener. It was a silver dagger, sharp and gleaming. My father stood up. Your Honor, we object. That document has not been authenticated. We don't know when it was written. It could be a forgery. Sit down, Mr. Castillo, the judge barked, not looking up. The time for objections was before you tried to have your daughter arrested. The judge positioned the letter opener under the flap. Snick. The sound of the paper tearing was the loudest sound in the world. He pulled out the folded parchment. He unfolded it. The paper crinkled. He adjusted his glasses. He began to read. I stood there, my breath held in my throat. I watched his face. For a long moment, his expression was unreadable. He was a stone statue of justice. And then, his eyebrows went up. He read it again. He stopped at the bottom of the page. He looked at the signature. He looked at the notary stamp on the document itself. He lowered the paper. He looked at my parents. It wasn't a look of anger anymore. It was a look of pity. Mr. Sterling, the judge said quietly, did you review the estate planning history before you filed this contest? We reviewed the will and the amendment. Your Honor, Sterling said, sounding nervous. You missed something, the judge said. He looked at me. Ms. Castillo, the judge said, you may want to sit down for this. Your grandfather was a very thorough man. I walked back to the table and sat next to Marissa. She grabbed my hand under the table and squeezed it hard. This document, the judge said, holding it up, is titled Conditional Codicil Regarding the Conduct of Beneficiaries. It is dated 2 days before his death. My father let out a strangled sound. I am going to read the operative clause, the judge said. He cleared his throat. If any beneficiary of this trust, the judge read, challenges the validity of my will, or seeks to impede the administration of my estate, or seeks to harass, intimidate, or falsely accuse the appointed executor, and if such conduct is proven to the satisfaction of the court, the judge paused. He looked directly at Ronan Castillo. Then that beneficiary shall be treated as if they had predeceased me. Their share shall be revoked in its entirety. Furthermore, if the challenging party is my son, Ronan Castillo, he shall be removed from any position of authority in any family entity, and his share shall be redistributed to the Arthur Castillo Scholarship for Legal Ethics. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Legal ethics, the judge repeated, a dry note of irony in his voice. It is a terror clause, Marissa whispered to me, a no-contest clause with a nuclear trigger. He knew, I whispered back. Tears pricked my eyes. He knew exactly what they would do. Mr. Sterling, the judge said, it appears your clients have not only lost their argument, they have just disinherited themselves. My father didn't move. He sat frozen, his face a mask of shock. My mother looked at him, then at the judge, and then she began to wail, a real, terrified sound this time. Your Honor, Sterling stammered. This is a surprise. We need time to examine the signature. We contest the validity. You can contest it, the judge said calmly, but I have the notary journal right here on the bench next to it, and I have the timeline of your client's behavior this morning. You have walked into a trap of your own making. We will take a 10-minute recess, the judge said. Mr. Sterling, I suggest you take your clients into the hallway and explain to them what 0 means, because right now, that is what they are looking at. He banged the gavel. I sat there, staring at the envelope on the bench. The stage was set, the trap was sprung, and my grandfather, from beyond the grave, had just delivered the final blow. The 10 minutes of recess felt like 10 years, but when the bailiff opened the doors and called for order, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted tectonically. Before the break, it had been a legal dispute. Now, it felt like a sentencing hearing. Judge Harrison swept into the room, his black robes billowing like storm clouds. He did not look at his docket. He did not look at the clock. He looked specifically, and with terrifying intensity, at the table where my parents sat. "Be seated," he commanded. My father, Ronan, was sitting stiffly, his hands clasped on the table in front of him. His knuckles were white. My mother was dabbing her eyes, but the tears had stopped, replaced by a look of dawning horror. They knew something had gone wrong, but they did not know the magnitude of the disaster yet. "We are back on the record," Judge Harrison said. His voice was quiet, which was far worse than if he had been shouting. Before the break, I opened a sealed document provided by the respondent, Ms. Castillo. However, before I rule on the contents of that document, I want to address the procedural history of this morning. He picked up the timeline Marissa had created. "Ms. Klein," the judge said to my lawyer, "you presented a timeline of events alleging interference. Do you have the supporting audio?" "We do." "Your Honor," Marissa said, standing up. "We have the file sent by the TSA liaison. We ask permission to play a 20-second excerpt." "Play it," the judge ordered. Sterling, my parents' lawyer, half rose from his chair. "Your Honor, we object to the—" "Overruled," the judge snapped. "Sit down, counsel." Marissa tapped her laptop. The courtroom speakers crackled, and then my father's voice filled the room. It wasn't the voice of a concerned parent. It was the voice of a man ordering a pizza. "Yes, this is the father. She is wearing a blue blazer. She has been making specific threats about the crew. She is unstable. You need to pull her off the line before she boards. Do whatever you have to do to hold her." The recording cut off. The silence that followed was absolute. "Do whatever you have to do to hold her," Judge Harrison repeated. He looked at my father. "That does not sound like a man worried about his daughter's safety. Mr. Castillo, that sounds like a man ordering a hit." "I was scared," my father blurted out, standing up. "I was afraid she would do something rash. I know my daughter. She gets emotional. I was trying to stop her from making a mistake." "Stop," the judge said. He held up a hand. "Mr. Castillo, you are not a psychiatrist. You are a litigant. You do not get to diagnose your daughter as a tactical maneuver to win a lawsuit. You used federal law enforcement as a personal delay mechanism. That is not protection. That is oppression." The judge turned his gaze to the pile of papers on his left. "And then we have this," he said, picking up the guardianship petition. "The document filed at 6:59 this morning, the one claiming Ms. Castillo is psychotic." "Your Honor, we stand by the clinical assessment," Sterling said weakly. "Ms. Klein?" the judge asked. Marissa stood up. She held a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor, during the recess, my office ran a verification on Dr. Aris Thorne and the Sunrise Wellness Center," Marissa said. Her voice was cool, precise, and deadly. "The medical license number listed on this assessment belongs to a chiropractor who died in 2019. The address for the clinic is a UPS store in Las Vegas. And the signature? It is a digital stamp available for purchase on a dark web forum for $50. My mother gasped. It was a genuine sound of shock this time. She looked at my father. "Ronan?" she whispered. My father didn't look at her. He stared straight ahead, his jaw working. "It is a forgery," Marissa concluded. "It is a fraudulent document submitted to this court to strip a citizen of her civil rights." Judge Harrison dropped the petition onto his desk. It landed with a heavy slap. "I am striking the guardianship petition from the record," the judge said, "and I am referring the drafting of it to the state bar for investigation. Mr. Sterling, if you knowingly filed this, you should start looking for a new career." I had no idea. Your Honor," Sterling stammered, backing away from his own clients. "It was provided to me this morning. I assumed it was legitimate." "Assumptions have consequences," the judge said. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Now," he said, "we come to the will." He picked up the parchment, the document from the sealed envelope. "Mr. and Mrs. Castillo," the judge said, You initiated this contest claiming that Arthur Castillo was not of sound mind. You claimed he was unduly influenced. You claimed you were the rightful heirs. He was sick, my father whispered. He didn't know. On the contrary, the judge said. He knew everything. He knew you better than you know yourselves. The judge put his glasses back on. This document is a conditional codicil to the trust of Arthur Castillo, the judge announced. It was executed 48 hours before his death. It was notarized. It was witnessed. And it contains a no contest clause with a specific trigger. I watched my father's face. He looked like a man watching a tsunami crest over his head. I will read the relevant section, the judge said. I, Arthur Castillo, being of sound mind and memory, do hereby declare that my primary intent is for my granddaughter, Jocelyn Castillo, to inherit and manage my estate. I anticipate that my son, Ronan, and his wife, Eleanor, may attempt to challenge this bequest. I anticipate they may use legal or extra-legal means to obstruct Jocelyn's administration. The judge paused. Therefore, he continued reading, if any beneficiary challenges this will, or if any beneficiary is found by a court of competent jurisdiction to have engaged in deceit, fraud, or obstruction to prevent the lawful administration of my estate, that beneficiary shall be deemed to have forfeited their entire interest. My mother let out a low moan. Furthermore, the judge read, his voice ringing out, if such conduct is proven, the share that would have gone to said beneficiary shall not revert to the estate. Instead, it shall be transferred immediately to the establishment of the Arthur Castillo Legal Ethics Scholarship Fund, to be administered solely by Jocelyn Castillo. The judge lowered the paper. Do you understand what your father did, Mr. Castillo? The judge asked softly. He set a trap. He knew you would not be able to resist playing dirty. He knew you would try to stop her. And he decided that if you were going to cheat, you were not going to get a single dime. No, my father said. He shook his head. No, that is not legal. You can't just erase us. I am not erasing you, the judge said. You erased yourselves. You triggered the clause. You filed a false police report. You canceled her flight. You filed a forged medical report. You walked right into the trap and pulled the lever. It is $3 million, my father shouted. He stood up, knocking his chair back. You are giving it to a scholarship? To strangers? That is my money. It was never your money, the judge said, his voice turning to steel. It was his money, and now, thanks to your greed, it is going to pay for law students to learn how not to be like you. Sit down, Mr. Castillo, or I will have you removed, the bailiff warned, stepping forward. My father sank back into his chair. He looked broken. He looked small. Here is the order of the court, Judge Harrison said, picking up his pen. 1. The contest to the will is dismissed with prejudice. The validity of the will and the codicil is affirmed. 2. The petitioners, Ronan and Eleanor Castillo, are determined to have violated the no contest clause. They are hereby disinherited from the estate of Arthur Castillo. Their interest is transferred to the charitable trust designated in the codicil. 3. Jocelyn Castillo is appointed as the executor and trustee, with full authority to administer the assets, including the new scholarship fund. 4. Regarding the conduct of the petitioners, the judge looked at me. Ms. Castillo, he said, you requested sanctions. I did, Your Honor, I said. I am granting them, the judge said. Mr. and Mrs. Castillo, you are ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the respondent in this matter. Furthermore, I am ordering Mr. Sterling to turn over all communications, emails, and text messages related to the flight cancellation and the airport incident to the respondent's counsel within 24 hours. And finally, the judge said, his eyes hard, I am directing the clerk of the court to forward a transcript of today's proceedings, along with Exhibit A, the TSA report, and the forged medical assessment, to the district attorney's office for review regarding potential criminal charges for filing a false report and uttering a forged instrument. My mother put her face in her hands and began to weep. He made me do it, she sobbed. Ronan, you said it would be easy. You said she wouldn't make it. Quiet, Eleanor, my father snapped. The time for silence was yesterday, the judge said. The hearing is concluded. The gavel struck the wood. It was the sound of a door slamming shut on my past. Marissa turned to me. She was smiling, a genuine, wide smile. We got it all, she whispered. The estate. The fees. The scholarship. You control the narrative now. I looked across the aisle. My father was staring at the table, unable to look at me. My mother was weeping into a tissue. They looked like strangers. They looked like people I used to know a lifetime ago. I stood up. I picked up my bag. I picked up the notary journal. And I picked up the cream-colored envelope. Ms. Castillo, my father said. I turned. He was looking at me now. His eyes were red, filled with a mixture of hate and confusion. You manipulated him, he said, his voice shaking. You turned him against us. You stole this family. I looked at him. I thought about screaming. I thought about telling him about the nights I sat with Grandpa while he was dying, listening to his stories while my father was at the country club. I thought about the fear I felt in the interrogation room. I thought about the humiliation of the fake medical report, but I didn't say any of that. I looked at the judge, who was still on the bench, organizing his files. I didn't steal anything, I said to my father. I just delivered the mail. I turned to the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. Good luck with the scholarship. Ms. Castillo, the judge said. Make sure they teach ethics. I will, I promised. I walked out of the courtroom. I pushed open the heavy double doors and stepped into the hallway. The air was cooler here. The noise of the legal world faded behind me. I walked down the marble steps of the courthouse, my heels clicking a steady rhythm. I walked past the security checkpoint where I had entered as a frantic victim. I walked out the front doors and into the bright, blinding sunlight of Juniper Wells. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and pavement. It smelled of freedom. I took my phone out of my pocket. I had one more text to send. Not to my father, not to the airline. I opened the contact for the Arthur Castillo Scholarship Fund. I didn't have the number yet, but I created the contact. Contact name, Future. I put the phone away. My grandfather was right. He didn't fear death. He feared being used. And in the end, he wasn't used. He was the hammer. I walked toward the rental car. I had a lot of work to do. I had an estate to manage. I had a scholarship to build. And I had a life to live that was finally completely my own. If your relatives try to erase you with paper, if they try to edit you out of the story of your own life, what would you do to write the truth back in? Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear your thoughts. So please comment down below and tell me where you are tuning in from. I really want to connect with all of you and hear your perspective on Jocelyn's victory. Please do not forget to subscribe to the Nina Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story get heard by even more people.